in unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Okay, so my section that I'm going to be talking today about is God-giving. Okay, and so before I got started and just thinking about it, like sort of the thing that I thought about was just sort of mindfully, doing something and, just being aware of what you're doing. And I was talking to Dean a little bit about this, and so we've been reading the Diamond Sutra and then reading Suzuki Roshi, and so things have changed a little bit over time where like Suzuki Roshi gives it sort of like the Japanese flavor of Zen, which is the same, but at the same time it's a little different too. And I think maybe, and which is different again than Vietnamese Buddhism with Thich Nhat Hanh, where Thich Nhat Hanh is always sort of gentle and doing things and just being aware of things, whereas in Japanese Buddhism, and it sort of comes out a little bit in here, it's like when we do something, we put our power into it. So it's like we put all our energy into it, and we burn ourselves up when we're doing it. And so that was my first impression of this, but let's go over it a little bit. And that's sort of the Rinzai way of what we think of as like, just putting everything into the chanting, into the thing there. But we can do the same thing when we're raking leaves, or when we're cutting vegetables, or when we're talking to someone. And so it starts off in. I don't know who put the book together. It's these were talks by Suzuki Roshi, and then one woman compilated them all and typed them all out. But I also wonder who actually picked out the quotes to start every chapter too. And so this one is God-giving. To give is non-attachment. That is just not to attach to anything, is to give. Okay. And so, like in normal everyday thinking, at least for me, I think of giving as in, here, this is for you. But with this quote, giving is just not attaching to something. So I'll read it again. To give is non-attachment. That is just not to attach to anything, is to give. And so in a way, if we practice sort of attachment in our lives, in every given moment, no pun intended, we are giving. So if we are, and this was sort of brought up earlier, it was just sort of the same idea, going back to if we rake the leaves with non-attachment, we're giving. If we make the coffee with non-attachment, then we're giving. If we're sitting, even if we're sitting with non-attachment, then we're also giving. And I have a few things here, some quotes that I picked out already. And so one of the things he does in this chapter too is differentiates between small mind or big mind, or the small I and the big I. And John and I were talking about that just a few minutes ago. And so our existence, every existence is given. So right from the get-go, we are because of everything else. And when here it says, moment after moment we are creating. The I that is creating is not the small I, but the big I. The big I is the oneness of everything. When you give, you feel good, because at that time of giving, you feel at one with what you are giving. And so again, the I that is creating is not the small I, but the big I. And so in non-attachment, then we become part of we are part of the big I, but we sort of let the big I flow, and so the creating, the doing, comes out of the big I. So it's not actually us that are doing it. When you feel good, when you give, you feel good, because at that time you feel at one with what you are giving. And so in the giving, when we're non-attached, we feel one with what we are giving. So that is actually what makes us feel good. Then he goes into the 6 paramitas. Dana prajna paramita is giving, but it also means to reach the other shore. Prajna paramita is true wisdom. Sila is the precepts. Kshanti is endurance. Virya is constant effort. And dhyana is Zen practice. And sorry if I mispronounced all of those, because I don't know how they're. And so at least in this chapter of the book, it's sort of like, in order to have the other paramitas, we have to actually start with the giving, which in this circumstance means letting go. And in letting go, we can actually give. Then he goes on, it doesn't matter what is given, a penny, a leaf, or one line of the Dharma, with the right spirit or energy, all that we do is dana prajna paramita. To produce something, to participate in human activity, is dana prajna paramita. And so I think of this as like the old Zen stories where people are enlightened by a stick, or the moon reflection, or holding up a finger. So it doesn't matter what is given, a penny, a leaf, or one line of the Dharma with the right spirit, energy, all that we are is dana prajna paramita. And then he goes on to talk about God. And so he relates God and the big I sort of similarly. So he says everything comes from the big I or God. We think I create, but we forget who creates. All creation comes from everything, or the big I. Not to be attached to something is to be aware of its absolute value. I really like that line. Not to be attached to anything is to be aware of its absolute value. Everything we do should be based on awareness and not material or self-centered ideas of value. Then whatever we do is true giving. So when we place a value on it, either positive or negative, we're not holding it in awareness where it is sort of part of the greater thing. And so I just thought of, there's this quote by Thich Nhat Hanh, which is, it goes something like this, I can't remember it specifically, but the rose is basically future compost. And then the compost in the future is going to be a rose. And when we tend to attach to things, we give it value as a rose, maybe, in the circumstances. But then we just discard it and loses all value for us if we don't see it with the bigger mind or the bigger I, or with the God seeing, as he says here. And then he goes on to talk about creation. And so part of giving is creating. So there's the creation from when we stand up from Zazen, when everything emerges from nothing. And so the idea that I took from this is that we're sitting in Zazen and we are basically, you could say, formless. We're not attaching to anything. But then in the process of standing up, we start to bring awareness to things. And as we bring awareness to things, in that sense, we're creating or we're even giving. The second kind of creation is when you act or produce something, say like food. The third type of creation is creating something within yourself, such as education, culture, ideas. When we use the first one, we use the big I, or God, to help us create. Otherwise, we work very hard. When we work, we forget the fundamental source of our creating. We are like children that don't know what to do after losing their parents. So when we lose our connection or our big I or our God, and then it causes us to attach, and then we forget basically ourselves and the things that we're either creating or doing at that moment. And he has an interesting thing here. To live is to create problems. But if we understand the Dana Prajna Paramita, we will understand how we create so many problems. Just by appearing in this world, we created problems for our parents. And when we die, we think we'll stop creating problems. But even after we die, we will still create problems. And he says, it is better to take care of problems now by being aware that what we do is a gift of the big I. We should forget day by day what we have done. This is true non-attachment. Do something through and through to resume our true activity of creation. If we remember that, everything will be carried out beautifully. And again, using the different language of different people, it's with Thich Nhat Hanh, it's mindfulness or awareness. With Suzuki Roshi, it's more putting our power or our effort into being aware. And in the Diamond Sutra, would it be that awareness is not awareness, so therefore the true awareness, so therefore it is the true awareness? Okay, thank you.
Jeff. So, I started to write down that I ran out of time, so I was on to your next comment. But the sudden realization with like the pebble on the stick, or the shout, the slap, or the sudden awakening, you said that's is the same as giving, or is the same as Dana Prajna Paramita?
Yeah.
Can you expand on that a little? I don't understand. I'm not seeing the total connection because it's sudden. How is sudden awakening? Why would that be more Paramita than a gradual awakening? Or is it just giving up of self completely?
Yeah, so I don't think there's any difference between gradual and sudden awakening. I think they're just ways that somebody along the line differentiated it. I heard someone once explain to me, sudden awakening is after years of gradual practice. So maybe I'll use a story to explain it. And so, and I think I've mentioned this before. I was at a retreat with a teacher, and so I was at one end of the room, and I was looking at the teacher at the other end of the room, and it was like, a bee's nest. Everybody was moving around like this. And the teacher just walked slowly across the room, mindfully, in amongst all that chaos. And it was just like, to me, it was just like, whoa! It was so different than everything that was going on around that person that, I don't know if it's awakening, but it certainly stood out, like there is a different way of being.
And so the gift is that teacher gave you the gift, or the entire world the gift, or
Yes.
of being present.
Yeah.
When you recognize that.
Yeah, and that's, I think, in the the old stories, more than anything, the person who is showing one finger, or there's the story of the showing no finger after it was chopped off.
I show Mark one finger all the time.
Yeah.
Anything yet?
But I think it's more the way the person is at that point that makes a difference than it is, showing the finger or pointing at the moon or anything else.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Well, just to kind of comment on the dana, that's, we studied that first as a paramita, and then it became huge in the Diamond Sutra that we've been studying, and now you bring it up, and I'm not uncharacteristically confused. When we studied it as a paramita, it wasn't referred to as a gift, it was referred to as generosity. And so it's hard for me to make the distinction between a gift and generosity. I mean, I get that they're related, but generosity, like the other perfections or paramitas, are kind of ways of being, like Shila, moral and upstanding according to a code, and Prajna being wisdom. They're characteristics of a way of being, like, and perhaps constantly, if you perfected them. So now to see it, the idea of a gift, and this really goes back to the Diamond Sutra too, which you tied into, because it seems to be characterized that way in the Diamond Sutra, but it just seems qualitatively different to a way of being of generosity, like sort of being, I think of Mother Teresa, she was for everybody all the time, everybody but herself, and whereas a gift is kind of here you, like you said, here you go, so I don't know if that's anything you even want to comment on. It's just something I felt like I wanted to say.
Yeah, and so let me rephrase it so see if I understand. So dana is giving. Yes. And so then how is being non-attached giving?
Well, that too, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think how that would be is if you're non-attached, then you're always giving, because your awareness, your openness to do the appropriate thing in any given any situation, in one sense. And so, say for example, this is the first thing that comes to mind. Somebody is on a subway track, or not on a subway track, a subway station. Someone falls down onto the tracks. A train is coming. Okay? A lot of times, somebody will instantaneously jump down, get the person, and push, get them back up before the train comes. Okay? So I can't say that that person was enlightened or anything like that, but at that moment in time, they were aware of what was happening and they gave. So they gave of themselves to get that person out of there in time. And so there's much smaller things that happen in our everyday life. So it's just, I was ringing the bell for the Salvation Army, and it was quite the contrast. So I was just in Thailand, where anytime you talk to somebody, they smile and they're warm. And so then I'm ringing the bell here, and everybody's like, man, I gave to myself, man, and so I was doing it with my father, and so we had some candy canes, and so he just started going up to people and giving them candy canes, and then they were like, oh, what are you guys doing? Oh yeah, when I come back, I'll give some money. Or yeah, here's some money right now. But it was his act of going, sort of letting go, and just giving people candy canes because no one seemed to be interested. Sort of brought people out of their wherever they were at into being aware of like, oh, what are you guys doing here? It's not just about trying to find the best present at the moment. So
add candy cane to the list of a stick, a finger.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. Instead of holding up the finger, hold up a candy cane. Got that, Keith?
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If they don't respond, do you hit them with a candy cane?
Throw it.
What struck me also is this is similar to practices enlightenment.
Mm. Yeah.
There's not some gap there.
Yeah.
The word that came to me was selfless. And within, whatever you want to call it, dana, generosity, gift, whatever it is, but just being selfless. There's, when you talk about a bodhisattva or a bodhicitta, there's that becoming selfless. So you can interact with all sentient beings as a bodhicitta. And that is just something, that needs to be there. And when you were talking about all the different words, I just was, whatever it is, it's the first thing has to be the way in which we are practicing within this is being selfless. Yeah.
Yeah, and that fits in to be selfless, you have to be non-attached.
Yeah.
And I hear a beeping over here.
I don't know what it is. Somebody's phone over there.
I think it's just.
Oh, that's my
serious.
phone.
Should
Yeah,
I
I'm
just
sorry.
silence it?
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry about that.
Only other small comment I said is I was impressed by how well the quote that was at the beginning of my chapter encapsulated the whole chapter for me. Is that what you meant as well by wondering who chose me?
Yeah, I was like, who did this?
Yeah, I agree. And I didn't even realize it was a quote from the chapter, actually, obviously, until I started reading it again. But then I said, oh, there it is right there. But yeah, it's like, boy, now I have to make this last 45 minutes when Suzuki summed it up in a 2-line quote.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
He's very good at doing that.
Mm-hmm. Very succinct.
He is very good at doing that.
yeah. And it was interesting. I mean, like reading any book, it's like you're reading in a way the mind of the person too.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was sort of fascinated how he went from different places, and I was almost wondering or wishing I could like talk to him and see, like, obviously there for each person, you know, there's a history and there's a story, even though we're not attached to it, that brings us to who we are today. And for him, you know, like how he in particular came to, you know, say the things he did. So besides just studying a lot and sitting a lot of Zen, there was obviously other backstories there too. It's sort of like if there's a interesting book, I don't know, Dean has such a huge library, he might have it. It's called Street Zen.
Street Zen.
No, I had it a long time ago. And it's about Isan Dorsey, I think. And so he was San Francisco Zen Center. And so the book is in half, so pre-Zen and after Zen. And so pre-Zen, he was a drug addict, transvestite, nightclub singer, you know, who was getting in trouble all the time. And then after Zen, he started or helped start the Zen Hospice in San Francisco. And the first half of the book was a lot more interesting than the second half.
I watched a documentary recently about a guy who started a Zen hospice center. Would that be him?
I don't know. It could be. He helped start the one in San Francisco.
Yeah, this is in San Francisco.
Yeah. And eventually he died there from AIDS. So.
What was his name again?
Isan Dorsey, I think.
Yeah, this may be another. Yeah, but this was, and it was out of San Francisco Zen. Did he just die like in the last couple of years?
No, I think he
Okay.
probably died 10 or
This is
15 years
somebody
ago.
else then.
Yeah.
This that I watched was,
Yeah. I thought of another funny story, but it has nothing to do with what we just went over, I don't think, but maybe it does. I saw a Japanese monk speak on the Genjo Koan. And he started off by saying, you know, my teacher was famous for, you know, his Genjo Koan talks and everything like that. And he's like, why I wrote my book was because he was all wrong.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
To make that judgment, he was all wrong.
He was all wrong, yes. I think there was a little attachment there.
Yeah, just a little. Just a little. Yeah.
So I guess we all have our own Genjo koan, so we're probably all wrong.
Yeah. And we're all right at the same time.
You know.
Yeah. I once saw a lecture in Colorado, and it was by Colorado's state's photographer. And I don't remember his name. And so he would all the beautiful pictures of the mountains of Colorado. He was one of the people who, out of probably many people who do that. And so his lecture was another right answer. And so he had this assignment to, take a picture of something and, beautiful scenery or something like that. And so he went through the slideshow of showing the pictures that he took for this assignment. And actually, this is great for this time too, because the first picture, you see it, and I was just like, oh my God, that's so beautiful, And I was like, nothing can top that one. And then the next picture, oh my God, that is so beautiful. And then the next picture, oh, geez, that's astounding, And then the next picture, you're just like, wow, he is like a great photographer because every picture is awesome, And it was that every picture that he took was a right answer, And so in a way, we think there's wrong answers. We think there's a wrong way to hit the clapper or ring the bell. And there's the prescribed way, and that is the right answer, but just in ringing the bell, that's the right answer also.
Maybe the wrong way is the right way.
There
Yeah.
you go.
It depends on who you talk to, of course.
Right.
And I think, right now with our politics and we have the same thing right now. We have lots of right answers, and everybody thinks they're all wrong except for their own. So.
One thing that politicians don't practice is don't know mind.
Mhm.
Like against,
Yeah, and that's the same as what he was talking about, like non-attachment. So.
Yeah.
Tim Ryan is I don't know if he's a Buddhist, but he's real into meditation, and he was in the Democratic primary for a while, and then he dropped out. But just what you said, like, I don't know how that kind of bombast that politicians seem to have to engage in, they have to. I don't know how that would be consistent with any of the precepts or the bodhisattva vows that just seem so, I don't know, the longer I practice Buddhism, the harder it is for me to, I used to be like you, Mark. I used to listen to that stuff, and I just can't anymore. It's too jarring. But I did tune in a little bit to the impeachment stuff, like you said you did, but that's all I could think about, other than the substance of what they were saying. That I would think, how can they do that? How can they be so aggressive and destructive, and I don't know. So Tim Ryan, I just wonder I've never actually heard him speak, but I do know that that's kind of one of his things is that he's some kind of a meditator. He's written books on it.
Wow.
See, if you look at that from the political thing, and I've heard politicians say them, well, I'm serving you, I'm serving the country.
Yeah.
This is my generosity. This is because I have devoted my life to this. But then it's kind of like, well, but how are you going about that?
Mm.
You know, what's motivating you to do that? Is it really that you're representing me? Or is it you're representing yourself, you know? Or that some lobbyist, which is usually the thing. I mean, it's, you know, if you listen to Sherrod Brown talk and other people that I've listened to through the years, it's very hard to be on the Hill and not be sucked into it all. I lived in DC and worked there, and I never wanted to work on the Hill. I could have, but it was like, oh my God, it was just, whew. I mean, I watched it, it was interesting, but I did not want to be right in the middle. I didn't want to be one of the little ants running around. Because it's
Yeah. And so going back to our reading, I think politicians, they know, or they have an idea of what the right thing is. And then they are willing to do anything to make their idea happen. And
if they get to hold on to that idea,
yeah,
that's the thing that gets affected. They get very influenced by very powerful people.
yeah.
It's very hard to hold on to that idea that you have.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes the only idea is to win. And so,
Oh, sure.
So if the idea is to win, then it doesn't matter if you're taking money from lobbyists or you're not doing what you said you would do,
Right.
or not paying attention to what's actually good for the people you represent. So.
I remember going to the Watergate to have my then husband, he and I went there to meet a lobbyist that worked for the company I worked for.
Mm.
The three of us walked in there. He knew everyone by first name, and they all knew him. I mean, it was just like, it was just like, you know, the power lunch.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this was the power cocktail hour. Oh my God. It's, yeah.
Did you say he broke into one?
Mm-hmm.
He broke into one?
No, he didn't. I did live there when that happened, but, you know, no, he did not.
That's good.
Yeah, but it's just amazing, you know, and then you think, like what we're talking about, that thing of being selfless, and you know, I watched people that I knew were good people, but it just, they got so caught up in it and so pulled into it, and it's like what they came in to do this, you know, what they had in their mind, their intention, you know, like our intention in our practice. And down the road, what they ended up, it was just, yeah. And we talk about that, you know, like I've said that, and I don't remember who said that. I wrote it years ago. They talked about no lack of scenery, you know. It's just, here you are surrounded by all this scenery. You know, all these things that are going on and can happen, and you can make a choice to be a part of it or not be a part of it, or, you know, whatever it is. Yeah, it's just so many influences.
And going back to Dogen and Anne there, so what Dogen had the chance, which I told, it was, we watched the same documentary at the same time, the Dogen one, and then Dean said, "Hey, Keith just told me about the same one." And but it was really interesting. So it's sort of like you read, you know, Dogen, and you get an idea, but then when you see it in movie form, it sort of takes on sort of more, it's more meaningful because you get the pictures and so you can sort of put everything together. And so he came from a political clan, which he then, so basically he was born a concubine of a political clan, and then I think did his father die? Yes. Yeah. And so he still had privilege, but he decided to become a monk, I think after his mother died. Yeah.
So then his uncle became,
His benefactor.
yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, that was the beginnings, but later on in life, Dogen he was actually sort of a radical, I think. Yeah. So in a way, he's not doing what we say to do. So at the time, he was like, I'm right. You're wrong. I have the true Dharma. You don't.
Yeah.
And so, that caused some problems for him, but then he went to the mountains, so he was away from the centers or where everybody was. But then the emperor called him in because the emperor was having problems, or the shogun, I think, at that time. And he helped the shogun, and he was offered, okay, I'll build you a gigantic temple here, and his response was basically, no, I don't want to be involved in this political life. I'm going back to the mountains. And so, in a way, that's Anne is doing. She's saying, hey, I don't want to be part of this political life. I want to concentrate on the most important things, or the most important question, which is the here and now. So, it's a good job, man.
Sometimes it feels kind of like a cop out, like
Yeah.
just
Oh, really? Yeah.
yeah, like like what's that? Monkey's hands over their eyes.
Hear no evil, see no evil.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you've heard me say what Bob Brown tells students, and he says, don't go there, don't turn away, just be present. So you're not like turning away from it, you're being present within it. But it also doesn't mean that you have to go there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe one thing I'd like to offer, since in this talk, Suzuki references quite a bit to this matter of being creativity, which enters into everything that's been talked about, especially politics. How do we creatively engage with what's going on? And the creativity, something I firmly believe that the practice and non-attachment facilitates. If you're attached to something, you can't be creative. It's Suzuki's beginner's mind that allows for creativity. You can see things in a brand new, fresh way and respond in a different way. You can see how the political debates are being carried out and walk away realizing, well, what a trap they keep falling right back into. Talk about karmic conditioning. And that's a prime example for our time. So how do we facilitate creativity in our lives through this practice of non-attachment. That we trust our ability to respond, and by something like engaged Buddhism, where we're part of a community that's sharing this practice. So we're all together practicing non-attachment and the creativity that can bring forth. And what can arise from that is really what I look forward to exploring with everybody next year when we turn our attention to environmental issues, looking at David Loy's Eco-Dharma text. But this matter of creativity, I mean, over 10 years ago, one of the big pivot points for me was seeing this connection between emptiness and non-attachment and creativity. And it led to a talk of mine that got presented more widely at more different places than any other talk I ever did. Probably ever will. And it's on our website, Zen Jazz and the Creative Art of Everyday Living. And it was looking at the commonalities between Zen practice and jazz performance. And I think the lessons there, the reason why I titled it "And the Art of Everyday Living," is it's nothing mystical or to be put on this elevated plane that only Zen masters and the great jazz masters can do. Actually, everybody can do it, and they can incorporate it in every aspect of their lives. Is to be able to be creative moment after moment after moment. And I think the gateway to that is to practice non-attachment, which is a courageous thing to do. I mean, the reason why we attach to things, remember, is the security it gives us.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into free fall, so I better grab this thing.
Yeah, fear of losing. Yeah,
Fear of the unknown.
yeah.
I mean, if I'm holding on to something, at least I feel like I know what I'm holding on to, and I'm bracing myself. But to just trust yourself is a powerful thing. It's a liberating thing, and it promotes creativity in one's life with anything.
What was the, you remember the Wayne Shorter documentary that we watched? And that's what Wayne Shorter talked about. And I had another thing, which I don't know if you ever watched it. It was a talk show where he was interviewed on there too. And that was what he talked about, that he's not attached to the notes. He's not attached to the music. He just plays. Like they don't practice together. They practice individually, but they don't practice together before they go out and play. Which, I can't remember that guy that had the talk show, that like blew him away when Wayne Shorter said that to him, and he said, "You never get together as a group and practice?" And he said, "No. So we practice individually, but when we get together, we just go out and play." And he is a, I don't know what his practice is, but he is a,
It's Nichiren.
and there was a documentary that we watched, and I mean, he just kept going back to it. That's how he lives his life, that's how he does his practice. And that's,
See the paramitas as connecting to our creativity, which we don't often do. But if the paramitas are about seeing the emptiness of all things, so in generosity, the emptiness of the three wheels, giver, receiver, and gift. That's what creates the opportunity for creativity. If we have a fixed notion of what's happening, it's just this, then there's no room for creativity. But if we see the emptiness, the boundlessness of it, then many possibilities. In the beginner's mind, many possibilities, as Suzuki put it. And if there are many possibilities, you've just created the environment for creativity. Lots of possibilities. But if education is about memorizing what's in a book and regurgitating it, there's no creativity. And our knowledge will never advance. You just pass it on from generation to generation, and that's it. So if you want to creatively evolve, we have to move beyond that and see things from a much vaster perspective. And that is what I think, at its heart, is what we as spiritual practitioners can bring to the world, is being able to see things from that the vastest possible perspective, and to invite creativity to deal with what at times can seem like just an insurmountable obstacle. It's going to require creativity. Definitely. Otherwise, yeah, there probably is no hope if we're just trapped where we are right now. So to practice the paramitas is to create possibilities, to facilitate beginner's mind. And speaking about titles, the title of the book is kind of Zen mind is beginner's mind.
Yeah.
And beginner's mind is all things are possible. So, as a teacher used to tell me, so have fun with it.
Yeah, and don't lose it. Don't lose beginner's mind. Yeah, that's, yeah.
May our intention equally penetrate every being and place with the true merit of Buddha's way. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to master them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it.